Good evening, everyone attending from the Asia Pacific region, and good morning to those joining us from Europe, and to my friends in the Americas. I ask, what are you doing awake at this hour? Welcome to this very special iIIRG Conversation webinar, a production of the International Investigative Interviewing Research Group. My name is Christopher Kelly, and along with Susanna Flolo, we are the co-directors of iIIRG and are very excited that you are here to hear from three individuals with unique experiences on investigative interviewing. I'll introduce our moderator in a moment, but please allow me to make a few announcements first. If you are new to iIIRG and this is your first event, welcome and thank you for being here. iIIRG is the world's largest network of practitioners, researchers, and professionals driving effective and ethical information gathering from individuals who may possess critical information. We unite to advance evidence-based practices that inform and enhance justice and security while maintaining the highest ethical standards in investigative interviewing. In addition to these quarterly webinars, we hold biennial in-person conferences, and the next of which will happen the week of 6 July 2026 in Leuven, Belgium. So please save the dates in your diaries and calendars. That's coming up quick. Also, iIIRG has a peer-reviewed journal, Investigative Interviewing Research and Practice, and we encourage you to check it out on our website. It is free and open access, and we strive to publish a diverse array of articles in it. Next, if you are not a member of iIIRG, we hope that you consider joining us to support events such as these webinars, plus gaining access to the largest worldwide network of investigative interviewing professionals. And you'll receive discounts on future conferences, access to materials such as webinar recordings and networking grants. We also have a new members-only LinkedIn group that we're excited about launching, so please check us out. Finally, if you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A box, and our moderator will field them to the panelists toward the end of our conversation today. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our moderator, Dr. Gemma Hamilton. Dr. Hamilton is an Australia Research Council DECRA Fellow and Senior Lecturer in Criminology and Justice Studies at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. Among other academic pursuits and of relevance to today's webinar, she is currently leading an Australian Research Council-funded project on sexual offence interviewing and victim survivor justice and well-being. Dr. Hamilton is also the editor-in-chief of the aforementioned journal, Investigative Interviewing Research and Practice. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to Dr. Hamilton and our panelists, and I'll turn it over to you, Gemma.
Thank you, Chris and Susan and the iIIRG for platforming this session today. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, whose unceded lands I'm working from today in Australia. I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present and acknowledge the importance of a treaty moving forward. Before today's session, I also want to give a quick content warning. We'll be talking about people's experiences of reporting sexual violence to police, which might be triggering for some audience members. So please feel free to contact me afterwards if you'd like some more information about support services. In today's session, I'll give a brief overview of sexual violence reporting trends here in Australia, as well as the criminal justice context. I'll then introduce you to our esteemed panelists, and we'll have a discussion for about 40 minutes. We'll then have about 10 to 15 minutes of audience question time. So feel free to put some questions in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. Okay, so here in Australia, much like many other countries, sexual violence is very prevalent. It's estimated that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men have experienced sexual violence since the age of 15. We know that sexual violence is significantly underreported to police. So, for example, our latest statistics show that only about 8% of women reported the most recent incident of sexual assault to police in Australia. We do know, however, that reports of sexual violence to police have been increasing over the last decade. Each year, tens of thousands of people report sexual violence to police across Australia. And in 2023, there were on average 99 sexual assaults recorded by police each day in Australia. In line with international trends, convictions for sexual offences remain very low and cases really make it past the police investigative stage when interviews with victim survivors are conducted. And we also know from research that police interviews are frequently re-traumatising for victim survivors. So the aim of today's webinar is to listen intently to victim survivors' experiences of police interviews in sexual offence cases, with a real focus on how to improve investigative interview practices, avoid re-traumatisation, and support the needs of victim survivors. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our amazing panel members. We have Sarah Rosenberg, who is the Executive Director of With You We Can, a national platform demystifying police and legal processes for victims of sexual violence while working to improve them. And we also have Jordan Gray, who is a Royal Australian Air Force veteran and survivor of sexual assault. She's the founder of the Athena Project, which provides support and advocacy for veterans who have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. Welcome, Sarah, Shelley, and Jordan, and thank you for being here today. I would like to start the discussions with this first question, and I might put it to you first, Sarah, if that's okay. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your reporting and police interview experiences.
For sure. Thank you so much, Gemma, and thank you everyone for being here. It's so important to listen to victim voices, and you're doing just that. So this is so exciting. I am assuming that you just want me to touch on the general nature of the process yet and not go into nitty-gritty. I don't want to take up too much time accidentally. So my reporting experience, I think, can be categorized by changeovers in detectives. I was cycled through 5 detectives across 3 stations. It took 24 hours over 3 months to finalize my statement. I was not told I could have a support person until the final session of signing that statement. I sat in rooms that looked like jail cells. I remember worrying about the working conditions for the detectives. The reception area was always cold and it smelt awful, and it was certainly not welcoming. And I couldn't imagine how someone without a support network that I had would have felt walking in.
Thank you. And Jordan as well, I'll pose the same question to you if you want to give a bit of an overview of what your reporting and police interview experiences were like as well.
Platforming victim survivor voices is really empowering, and it's more about what we do from here going forward. So I think tonight's conversation, or tonight in Australia for me, this morning for many others, is also really important, but it's about the actions we take from here going forward to change how we approach this. So for myself, I experienced both the military police interview style and the civilian police when pursuing giving my statement in Australia. Unfortunately, my experience was very much the same of Sarah and Shelley. I was met with a very sterile environment. I felt the environment in which I gave my official statement was like a fishbowl, and a lot of people were looking in on me, but I couldn't see out. So there was a lot that didn't feel safe. I was also in a bit of a niche situation in that I was in the military at the time. So because I was reporting through the civilian police in Australia, the military appointed me a support officer, which was not a safe person for me. They were actually my direct supervisor at work. So that therefore further impacted the way that I went about that interview process. For context, I navigated giving my statement in a regional and rural area in the Northern Territory in Australia. So for those that aren't aware, the Northern Territory is basically a very different world in Australia, in Australia's jurisdiction. So I experienced both informal and official means of police getting statements and I guess fact-finding from me. But yeah, I guess to echo the thoughts of Shelley and Sarah, it was very clinical. It was not a safe or a soft space, and it was one that was incredibly re-traumatising.
And I guess reflecting on maybe some more positive experiences, was there anything, Sarah, that the police interviewers did in your case that made the process easier?
Of course there was. I remember, I feel like it's important to emphasize that in my experience at least, the entire journey, there were people who I know wanted to support me, and it wasn't about whether they had my best interests at heart or whatever. I often reflected, even in the moments, not even in hindsight, I often reflected on how these detectives were victims of a really dysfunctional system too. I never felt blame or anger. I felt frustrated for all of us, because not only was the whole thing retraumatizing and therefore not collecting the best evidence from me, it was just really inefficient, sorry, for everyone and whole of community. So I do just want to stress that in my experience, there was never one person at fault. There were loads of things that I found really useful. I think the number one thing for me was getting a text from a detective before they would call me from an unknown number, because my process had taken some time, and I had initially given a report for 5 hours before being told I should really make a statement, and I thought I was making a statement. That's how my process started, which was just so confusing and disheartening. From then on, I really developed a fear of unknown numbers, which sounds silly, but when you're in the thick of trauma and you're sitting at work and you're trying to hide things from your boss and you're running to the stationery cupboard to take calls and you don't know what's going on, I just remember being like so grateful that the detectives had caught on to that and really listened to me and would send a message and say, I'm about to call you. It's me, pick up. And it just really changed the nature of things so quickly. It sounds so small, I know. Something else that I found really useful, more to do with the actual statement giving, was reassurance that I could edit things later. Obviously, talking about these things isn't easy. You're drawing on really horrific things. They may have happened some time ago, or they may have not been processed because they're so fresh, depending on when you're reporting. I really found it useful to be prompted, you can give more detail here or less detail here, so that I wasn't just wasting anyone's time, but also wasn't trying to fill in blanks unnaturally. And I understand that others might find that frustrating or even dismissive if someone was sort of prompting them or trying to fill in their sentences. But I believe that would be entirely dependent on the trust formed or the relationship built with that specific officer. And the last thing I would say was less relevant in my experience because I guess relative to where most victims did, I reported quite soon after the experience, but incorporate the research we have around memory science and how to actually make sure we're collecting best evidence. New South Wales Police, which is where I reported, are really pushing those protocols out at the moment. It's funny that we have so much science, but a lot of our systems are behind in actually drawing on that science. So I think that's something that would be really useful for everyone as well, not just victims, but police. Obviously, you want to be collecting your best evidence, and we know a lot about how trauma memories are encoded now. And so I think that would be something that would be really positive, and I'm sure is around the world sort of slowly.
And Jordan, did you want to add to that as well? Were there any things that police interviewers did in your case that made the process easier?
Yeah, I think like Shelley, there was definitely a few times with the second investigator that or the detective that did take on my case, who kept that rapport up, and that for me was really important, was having that relationship, that established relationship of trust and rapport, and I guess mutual respect, in that we both knew like what was happening through the process. And for me, going through that process, as for many victim survivors, it's a complete unknown. You're going in blind. What I found was very helpful for me was the initial detective that I had explained everything in great detail about what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, and why. And as things were happening in real time, as I was giving my official recorded statement, he would explain things and take the time to do that. I think something for me that also stuck out was he put and he used I guess a way to ground me as well when I was giving my statement, especially the traumatic parts that were really upsetting. Because, like Sarah, I gave my statement 2 days, like in the first 2 to 3 days after my experience. So the I guess the emotions were very raw. He used grounding techniques such as like, what could I feel, what could I see, what could I hear, and I now know that they're also psychological grounding tools. So they were also very helpful in the moment of giving my statement. And then as he transitioned out of being my detective and a new one came in, he established rapport very quickly. And like Shelley, he would send text messages just to check in on me, not about the case, but just me as a human being. And that for me was incredibly different, and something that was really pivotal, I think, because it was incredibly different to how the military police I guess approached the experience for me. So and the military police didn't end up prosecuting, so that left that where it was. But the civilian police, I guess there were definitely glimmers in amongst what was a very broken system, and is a very broken system.
And I guess, Sarah, I mean, you've already given so much, but I wonder if you want to elaborate a little bit more on, were there any negative things that you wish the police interviewers had have done differently?
Yeah, of course. Of course there were. You've just made me think of the both of you about how one of the detectives assigned to my case, that thought of that concept of, like, you know, we're still human, we're still people. This isn't, you know, the entirety of who we are. We have lives beyond this. And one of the detectives assigned to my case attended my 25th birthday as I was still reporting. You just reminded me of that, which is a really positive memory. Yeah, as for negatives, I just feel that things that one would think are common courtesy just didn't seem to apply. You know, a heads up that today is not the day you'll talk about the assault. In my case, it was a situation of domestic violence, and I would go in, like, have prepared all morning, gotten myself into a headspace, psyched myself up, and then be asked what I had for breakfast on my third date with the perpetrator. Or a heads up that the detective was running late, or even that the appointment would need to be pushed. You know, I'd go in, I'd have booked a time in advance because my statement took so long, and was done over, obviously, many days. I would go in for the time that we booked. I would wait another hour, and we'd be 2.5 hours late just for the appointment to not go ahead. A heads up not to get too close to any one detective. You know, if changeover is normal, I just needed to be told that. I feel that the officers, they didn't mean to. They didn't mean to keep me in the dark in this way. I feel like it's just because they weren't in my position. They didn't know the things that, you know, only a victim would want to know, which is why this webinar is so important. And then the other really big thing for me was that, and I almost feel like it doesn't need to be said, but the second detective I had was on her first case. I was a guinea pig, and it is difficult to put into words how heinous that particular experience was until someone took pity on me and a more senior detective took over.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Jordan, I'll ask the same thing. Were there any negative things that you wish police interviewers had have done differently either in the reporting or the interview phases?
Yeah, for me, there are some critical standouts. For me, the very first interaction with the police was something that I would definitely change. So in the Northern Territory, there are mandatory reporting requirements of nurses, doctors, and first responders. So because I showed up to the hospital in the Northern Territory for a suspected sexual assault, is what they called it, the police were automatically notified. I wasn't told about that, and I wasn't aware that there was mandatory reporting in place. So when I actually went to leave the hospital a number of hours later, the police met me outside, and it wasn't very trauma informed. It was actually very intimidating. They said, "Hi, Jordan, we need to take you down to the station to get your statement." And I said, "What?" Like, I've actually just been in the hospital given all of my, I guess, DNA evidence, which is also an incredibly invasive and traumatizing process. I'm not ready to do that now. They then said they would come and see me back on the Air Force Base where I was in a couple of hours to give me some time to decompress after the hospital. They then did that. They turned up to the Air Force Base, and I was at a house on the base. There were a number of other people at that house, all of who would turn out to be witnesses in the case. The initial, I guess, engagement with the police, they took my statement and my recollections of what had happened the night before in front of all of those other witnesses. And they were essentially filling in the gaps for me, and where the gaps that I had in the timeline and in the event, which then convoluted the chain of evidence and made things incredibly hard when we did go to trial. So it was a really difficult experience. First up, it was not well thought out. It was not safe. It was not trauma informed, and I think it then had follow-on effects in the trial. So for me, that was something that was really negative about my experience, and it was the very first interaction I had with the police. In terms of other things going forward, something as little as what Sarah was saying, sending a text before they were going to call, that was, and I still to this day have an issue of answering unknown numbers on my phone because my detective never did that, and nor did any of the prosecution team. So I would have to just pick up unknown numbers, hoping that it'd be somebody safe and not somebody I didn't know. So for me, that was something that could have changed the experience for me, just to make it that little bit more easy going forward. And I think those are the small changes that can be made in real time that don't necessarily need to be mandated by policy, but are simple choices that individual investigators can make along the way. So yeah, for me, they're the two standouts.
Absolutely. And Sarah, then what do you think is important for supporting victim survivors in police interviews?
I think what is most important is agency. That is the lens that needs to be applied, one of agency. I used to think retraumatisation was telling your story over and over, and that's what people meant when they said reporting is retraumatising. It's not that, it's that the process takes away your agency, just like it was taken when you were assaulted, right at the time you're trying to reclaim it. So, you know, we've said it already, heads ups, participation where possible, choice where possible, explaining the decisions made about us without us. It's as small, and it seems so meaningless, but it's as small as asking, does an email suit you, or would you prefer that I gave you a phone call when I need to get a hold of you? Do you like it, the look of this room, or perhaps there's a different one we can sit in? These tiny, tiny things like go so far in restoring that sense of agency, because without it, we just feel alone and in the dark, like in the prosecution or in the investigation of our own perpetrator, and that's really what it is. So I would say that's the most fundamental thing, you know. It's not coddling or being sensitive or treating us this way or that way. However you treat us, ask us first.
And I'll move now to my final question, which I'll ask all three of you. It's a big one and it might overlap with things you've already said, but Jordan, what's one key message that you would like police interviewers or trainers to consider when interviewing victim survivors in sexual offence cases?
Thanks, Gemma. That's a great question. I think for me, it comes back to one of the answers I gave at the very start of the webinar, and it's treating us as people first, and victim survivors comes after that. At first and foremost, we are human beings, just like the interviewers themselves. So I think for me, that's incredibly important. I think it's the approach as well, building a relationship and like a mutual relationship of respect and trust is really important. That rapport goes a long way. And as we've seen, there are a lot of commonalities between mine, Shelley, and Sarah's stories, all of which correlate to a lack of that. And I think that that goes a long way. It's the little things that go the long way, giving the autonomy to the victim survivor, allowing them to have choice over where they give their statement, over whether or not they feel comfortable, over whether or not they want to access frontline support, whether or not they want a social worker to meet them at the station. Those are all small things that can be done to help the victim survivor in real time. So I guess for me, it's a pivotal window that investigators are that first kind of stop for many victim survivors, but they really can be the difference between whether or not that trauma is cemented, or whether or not it is something that can then be overcome with therapy in the future. But there is a very real risk that many investigators can deepen the trauma and deepen the harm caused to victim survivors in those interview situations. And I guess for me, it is something that has a lasting effect. And I can tell for Shelley and Sarah, that is also a shared experience. So those small things are definitely really important. And I think there's access to training that you don't just have to wait for your institution to provide. Go out and seek it yourself. I know there are organizations here in Australia like Full Stop Australia who offer and provide that training for victim, for trauma-informed care, and about listening and responding with compassion, because that can be the make or break for many victim survivors is that initial experience of whether or not they feel believed, whether or not they feel supported, and whether or not they feel truly heard. So for me, that would make all the difference. And I think there's also an incredible difference about putting victim survivors in environments that are clinical and sterile, rather than prioritizing environments that are soft spaces and safe spaces and neutral spaces, something that doesn't have any resemblance to a standardized interview room in a police in a police station. In using a military context, there are the Joint Military Police Unit here in Australia is currently, they have an offset group called the SORT, so the Sexual Offence Response Team, which is a group of social workers. Within each of the JMPU stations here in Australia, they now have a soft room. So you walk through a police station on a military base, it looks like a standard civilian police station, but you enter the soft room and you feel like you have been transported somewhere else. That has made a pivotal difference for so many survivors in real time. So that there really are, for many people, they hear that and they think it's something that doesn't really make that much of a difference, but in reality it does. So I think, yeah, that for me, and bringing it back to exactly what I said at the start, is treating us as human beings first and foremost.
Thank you. And Sarah, I'll ask it as well. So what's one key message that you would like police interviewers or trainers to consider when interviewing victim survivors reporting sexual violence?
I really love and want to echo or amplify what Jordan said, and that really emphasize that whoever you speak to in the aftermath, particularly early on, and particularly people of authority, can really cement whether you are validated and feel heard and supported, or whether you never disclose again, stop help seeking. And it shouldn't be underestimated how much those even small interactions, even with the reception officers, can change the trajectory of someone's life. But I want to say something a little different to that as well. Everything police do to support us to speak up and stay engaged in the system shouldn't be seen as an add-on or as something that you have to do because, you know, sexual violence victims are special, or we're sensitive, or this is an afterthought because we're broken in some way and we have to be handled with care. Everything you do to support us is fundamental to the evidence collecting process because you cannot proceed without us. Victims speak up so that the state can prosecute and keep the community safe. You know, most of us report for the next victim, maybe somewhere along the way realize that we're worthy and deserving of justice ourselves. We go through hell to do it, and we do it to the shrill sound of people claiming that we've lied. It is in your interest, and it is in the state's interest, to treat victims of crime with care and with dignity.
Got goosebumps. That was beautifully said, Sarah. Now we have some time for audience questions. I'll have a little look in the chat and the Q&A. I can immediately see one that might be good for perhaps Jordan. Is it possible to describe or give some examples of what a soft interview room looks like?
Yeah, so in my experience, a soft interview room and from what I've witnessed in Australia on the Australian military bases and the ones that I've been in person, they reflect something similar to a lounge room like you would see at home. So lounges, bright colors, soft toys, as Shelley was mentioning, fidget toys are also a really good addition in those spaces. I find that artwork that separates the space from the clinical like world that's outside has also been really pivotal. But essentially they are a calm and a safe and a comfortable environment. So they have comfortable chairs, a lounge. If you want to lie down, you can lie down. If you want to sit with your legs crossed, you can sit with your legs crossed. It's not just a stock standard desk chair and a desk. It's guided on the survivor's terms. So if you want to sit in a beanbag, you can sit in a beanbag, and they are essentially like what you would imagine a comfortable lounge room or an office space to look like. I from my experience, they reflect more like a lounge room and are just very different to the clinical environment in which a normal police station or an interview would be.
Thank you. We have another one here. So it says, Sarah mentioned the impact of being interviewed by multiple people. One thing we're finding in some of our research is that there is also a barrier between getting past the frontline officers who may not be specialists and seem to sometimes dissuade reporting, and different and more positive experiences with the trained sexual offence interview specialists. Does this align with the panel's experiences, and does it perhaps indicate we need to give more attention to initial reporting, not only training specialists? Sarah, maybe I wonder if you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, I was looking at that question early on when it popped up. What I really like, just to speak from a New South Wales context, because that's where I live and that's where I went through the system. Detective Superintendent Jane Doherty, who is the head of the sex crime squad there, recently I was sitting next to her and she was talking to an audience of detectives about the significance of the duty officer on the front desk, and just the way anyone who interacts with a victim has the opportunity to change their lives for better or worse, and that really can't be underestimated. I think anyone who goes into this work should be trained, just as I think anyone who, I mean, we've gotten rid of civil studies, like in Australia, people graduate with a law degree without ever having come across sexual assault procedural law. And I just think it's really silly because, I mean, in Australia, sexual violence is the only crime that is increasing. Like, this is a whole community problem. It is costing all of us a fortune. You know, the ramifications, the health costs, the employment outcomes, like the cost of recidivism. I really think it should be covered by everyone, no matter what they intend to specialize in, or where they think they'll end up as an officer, because you really kind of underestimate the role that even the smallest interactions play. And I think that would probably, I mean, it should extend beyond just sex crimes as well.
Mm. Thank you. And I think we have time for maybe one more, which I'm just trying to go through. There's lots of really good suggestions and comments here as well. One person has asked if we could give some more examples or elaboration on grounding techniques. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of volunteer for that one. If Shelley, you want to, or I think Sarah, you might have, Andrew had mentioned grounding before.
I think for me, I think back to grounding techniques that I've gone through with my psychologist. So for me, what was used in my police interview was think of the things that, like, my detective had me close my eyes when I got really overwhelmed, and he said, I want you to picture yourself in that moment. What are the things that you can touch? What are the things that you can hear? What are the things that you can see? And had me, those are grounding techniques. And I do that with my psychologist now. And when I have panic attacks in real time, I work through, I guess, a process of 5 things I can see, 5 things I can touch, 5 things I can hear, 5 things I can do, and also box breathing. So working through those techniques, a simple Google will give you what box breathing is, but those, even just, I guess, not overlooking the power of deep breaths, are also a really powerful grounding technique, giving them something cool to hold on to or anything like that. There's a lot of different things that can be considered grounding techniques, and for a lot of people, they differ. But for me, what I experienced in that real time was the sensory grounding techniques.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just jump in as well. Oh, am I dropping? Can I jump in? Is that okay? My
Yes,
connection is
please.
unstable. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. I could just see that thing flashing. I'm like, oh no. What I really like as well is that something that you can do, and while not having to stop, and because sometimes you need to stop and you need to take a moment and do those mindfulness and grounding techniques. Other times, it's as simple as the butterfly hug. If anyone knows the butterfly hug, comes from EMDR, which is a somatic type of therapy that, you know, is all about memory reprocessing. And something as simple as binaural stimulation is what it's called, or it could be tapping on your legs. Just, it has to be one side and the other. Even I can keep talking about something traumatic and just immediately feel safer and grounded while I'm doing this. Same with and I know all this kind of seems silly, but there's like complete science behind it, and these are age-old techniques. This one, I think it's called havening or something. And these things just help release cortisol in the way that if you pull on your ear a little bit, you might end up yawning. If you're in tune with your body, just releasing cortisol in the moment, and you don't have to stop either. So there can be a combination of stopping and taking a minute. But if you're feeling like maybe that's, I don't know, if it's I mean, it should never be too time consuming, but just something different for someone who might be a bit averse to stopping, I guess. Yeah, all those somatic techniques are incredible, and they're so simple and they work, and we should really all be doing them all the time.
Thank you. And I'm conscious of the time, so I think any other questions, I might recommend that people email them through, and then I can follow up with some answers with them. But thank you for participating in the chat. I think we will end it there. And I want to just say, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, Sarah, Jordan, and Shelley, for so generously offering your time and your vital insights today. I am deeply, deeply grateful for your participation. Thank you for using your voice to help other people. And thank you so much for everyone's attendance today. It's so lovely to see so many people registered and so many people in this session today. It's just, yeah, it really makes me feel so happy that we've got such a large interest in this. So thank you so much, everyone. I wish everyone a safe and happy week. And this is just the start of the conversation. I think we'll keep doing research and improving practices and making the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Jordan and Shelley and Sarah, for sharing. This is really an amazing session that we had, and we're all very grateful for your participation. And as Gemma said, this is a critical information, as I think you're seeing in the chat. So many people are weighing in and thanking you for sharing, because this is really important information. So I hope everyone has a wonderful night, a wonderful day, and we can keep these conversations going through email and other forums. So thank you all.